Hello everyone, it's Chad. Just want to talk today about FE and FI and the difference between the two. This has been a topic I've wanted to talk about for quite some time. It's just taken a lot of investigation and it's not perfect by any means, so I'm open to any suggestions as I improve this video in the future. However, it's been by popular demand. I've been asked to do this video for quite some time by many different people. I guess they want to see what I feel about these two particular functions and how they operate. Even though I'm kind of an intuitive preference, as in I really enjoy talking about intuition, and I have a bias for intuition, and the complexity of intuition is astonishing. Feeling is actually more complicated by a degree which took a much more research than thinking, feeling, and thinking, intuition, and sensing, which why it has taken me so long to produce this video, to give you guys valuable content. So at least I'll try to attain that. I may go off a little point here, and it's going to be hard to explain logically because you have someone like me who is a inferior function feeling user, and it's an introverted feeling, so which is harder to even express. So I'm going to do the best I can. FE users, if you find that my information is not valid or there's something wrong with it, I will simply edit this video, or I will just add notes to correct myself as I move forward, refining the definition of these things. So anyway, let me get started here. I'll start with extroverted feeling. So extroverted feeling seeks to harmonize and have conformity in the environment by aligning itself with the majority. This is why a stereotype of FE is that this is shallow or fake, which is what it's called quite often by a lot of FI users, is because if they're surrounded by a bunch of happy people, they're not going to be the person who's going to be in the pity party mood, even though they may have had a bad day. They're going to find a way to harmonize, whether it's sacrifice of their own feelings or desires or whatever else, because they feel that. Now, a lot of that has to do with maturity, so we're not going to dive into that in detail because it's really off topic, but the point is they want to harmonize with others. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When you have a dominant FE user or a auxiliary FE user, it becomes more powerful. More than likely, you are going to harmonize based on an FE user is going to harmonize the environment based on what they feel and value as the greater good, according to what a society or the majority has established in that group. So if they feel that at that point that the group needs to be more observant or be more happy or be uplifted, FE users who have a very strong auxiliary or dominant FE, they are going to have the ability to change the mood of the group pretty easily. So they have power when it comes to the emotional environment. And I don't want to use the word emotional too much because this is a feeling thing, and feeling is more of a value-based thing versus emotions. I don't want to confuse emotions and values. So FE requires significantly less processing time, so it immediately perceives a value in the environment, and it's not a perception function, don't get me wrong. It takes it in through SE or SI or NI or NE. It takes the feeling through, but it processes and places a judgment on that emotion immediately, so it doesn't take much time. So they're very quick on picking up how people feel in the environment. It's like I immediately know if this person's sad, this person's happy, this person's miserable, whatever else, as an FE user. I'm not an FE user, so I'm going to assume that's how they feel. It kind of amazes me because I have to process how people feel based on what they say, and I'll go into FI in a second. It seeks to... It takes that less processing time because it takes feelings off what is essentially... without the comparison to its internal values or history, in a sense like what SI does when it takes in something and processes it in relation to the past. FE doesn't process anything in relation to the past. It just knows. It just places a judgment on that feeling immediately. That person's sad, and it just knows it immediately. And so it doesn't compare it to past experiences. It doesn't compare it to any of those things. It just can perceive what is real through the environment, especially I'm sorry, especially when it's in a situation where it is using extroverted intuition. That becomes very, very, very effective in doing so. So you get the NTP types that have that ability, although their FE is poorly developed at the bottom. So it takes them longer to get that kind of control, but after a while they're able to start picking up those things combined with extroverted intuition. However, I want to leave that out and talk about TI and FE in just a second, how they relate to each other. So it harmonizes with others by changing its own resonance, or by changing the direct feeling of the environment in order for harmony. So what FE really does is it seeks harmony. It seeks putting everyone on the same wavelength and getting everyone to understand the greater good. It's often said that FE seeks for socialism, and because socialism was designed for the greater good, capitalism, on the other hand, was designed for the few. But that's why you'll find a lot of FE users more leaning towards socialism, even though sometimes FI users might, based on the way they're raised, but more than likely it's going to be an FE user. And you really can't logically resolve this issue because they're two different feeling types and their value judgments are entirely different. So it will harmonize with others by changing its own resonance. So it'll quickly surrender its own system for the greater good. So if the world decided that capitalism was the best way to go, and it wasn't necessarily logical, but everybody was like, we want this, FE would support it. In the other sense, if the world if the environment of even the United States supports uplifting everyone for the greater good, and it's going to lean toward that way. So of course, there's exceptions. Always, FE users can be capitalist at times. It just depends on what they feel in the majority of what group. It's just a lot more unlikely. So, it has an innate desire to feel connected to others. It has to connect others. Much like TE in the environment seeks to create logical consistency. If you've seen my TE versus TI video, it seeks to create that logical consistency between all things. So, or rather, logical consistency between a particular situation. I talked about A plus B plus C, and then I talked about how that is an independent, and TE is a independent logic. Well, FE is a independent feeling. What that means is every situation is unique in FE, and that what emotional environment pertains to that particular situation will not be translated over to another particular situation. It doesn't build this database of logic. It's fast acting, which is great. It's quick. So for emotional environment, it's very perceptive. However, it does not have this internal database of logic like TI does. TE doesn't. TE just looks at something and immediately perceives the logic and goes, that's logical or that's not. TI has to process it and fit it in with its framework. And just like FE is quick, but FI has to process it. Okay, so much like TE, it seeks to create this logical consistency, okay, in order to form a place of truthful self-expression. Okay, so we'll talk about that in just a second, TE and how it wants to form logical consistency and why, because its relationship with FI. However, FE seeks to form harmony externally to make universal truth more visible. Okay, TI seeks this universal logical consistency throughout the environment, and because FE is on the same axis, basically you gotta think of these two functions as backward. Like, okay, think of FI and TE axis, flip it around, and you've essentially got the TI FE axis. TE FI, one axis, FE TI, one axis. They really can't be on the same axis, and I'll explain why. Okay, so FE seeks to form harmony externally. Okay, it wants this harmony between all people, to make universal truth more visible. It wants to be able to, TI has this desire to create a universal truth between all things, so it seeks to create an environment that it's easier to perceive the truth because everything is equal. So dominant FE users have full control of the environment of the feeling to be able to set that environment up, to create an environment for TI to adopt a universal truth and cross-reference it with its internal framework. FE uses control to create an appropriate feeling in the environment to establish that harmony, but this is the motive. So FE in dominant users is fueled by an unconscious TI. And that's what people are ignoring when they try to explain FE, is why FE does what it does. It seeks this external... So I don't like when people say FE is shallow. I used to say that myself, okay, because I just was ignorant of the fact that FE is fueled by this deep logic. And it's fueled by this deep logic, and it wants to create this universal plane of emotion and feeling. I'm sorry, feeling and value judgments, so it's easier to derive logic from. That's why TI governs FE in a dominant FE user. TI is just underneath it, and it's such an inferior function. It's totally unconscious. Why do you truly seek harmony? Is because TI is fueling that. TI wants that that truth. Now, because FE is a dominant function, occasionally FE users will stretch the truth, but they truly know logically what's going on, but they'll stretch a truth to manipulate the emotional environment, and not in the negative sense. They're doing it for this greater good. So it is concerned about the value that majority attaches to things. It does not form its own. Well, it does, but it's not as important. It'll gladly surrender its position on something should it be for the greater good. And so in a sense, it's very unaware of its own values, and if it is aware of them, it knows why it's aware of them, but it's always for the reason of the greater good. What is going to create the most harmony? And again, because of TI being its hidden fuel. But its lack of awareness of its self-values, it becomes hyper-aware of the value attached to things through the majority. So external values, it becomes super aware. It sees all people as essentially created equal. Not one person has any more value than another, and it seeks to, sacrifice the individual for the greater good of the majority. And if you understand why it does this, and you understand that TI governs this, it makes perfect sense. If you don't understand this, then it creates problems. You think, okay, well, that's not right, because I'm an individual, I want to express myself. And granted, that is not how you want it to be. You want it to have this more... You want it to have this consistency. So that's why it does what it does. And this external harmony is independent of preconceived notions, which I explained earlier. So it's independent of those notions. And its feelings are not based off subjective experience. In other words, it's objective, and it's going to pick up what's happening. If a person is sad, they're going to know a person is sad through whatever perception function they're using, and they're going to place a judgment on that. The person's sad. And it's not that certain person's sad because I've been in those shoes necessarily. It's just I know that person's sad. I don't have to cross-reference it because I've established this external order. Anyway, so that is FE in a nutshell, and I made a couple mistakes explaining that, so I hope it comes across as effective. I may have to go back and edit. It was difficult to push out, so I apologize for kind of rambling on. It is a very complex topic, and I'm doing the best I can, so I apologize. And I'm using typed notes here that I typed up to do this, so you'll see me reference off to the side occasionally, and that's just me referring back to those notes. So, on the other hand, let's move into FI. How FI is essentially much like TI, and they're very similar. Similar to TI, FI seeks to harmonize feelings with an internal feeling framework, much like that TI seeks to cross-reference all logic with its internal framework. FI seeks to cross-reference everyone's feelings and the feelings of the environment, the value-based things of the environment, with its own internal environment. It's not interested in changing its structure. It's not interested in that. It's a solid framework. It's built on a large database of a subjective experience, and so FI users will typically know a lot more about why someone's feeling the way they're feeling. FE users will have to pry more. FI users will almost like innately know why someone's feeling the way they're feeling. And they're able to harmonize themselves, that person with themselves. So I'll get into that in a second. But so much like TI categorizes emotions, and it puts them in, or not emotions, I'm sorry, logic, and it puts logic in little boxes, and it somehow draws lines between each box, creating this large framework of logic where everything is interrelated. FI is a interdependent feeling environment. Every feeling is related to another feeling based off of subjective experience. All of this is processed in the head. So FI users seem to be detached from emotion a lot because they have to process this. Just like a TI user takes time to process logic to make it, and they seem to be slower in school because of that, is because they're processing and they're cross-referencing. FI does the same thing. So FI users are less likely to react emotionally because they are processing this with their framework. So they're less likely to know immediately what they're feeling. They just can feel it, and they're very aware of it, this self-awareness that comes out. So these feelings, much like TI, are categorized in these unexplainable, I'm going to call it that because I can't explain them, but separate sections in the mind. So feeling A, there's feeling B, there's feeling C, there's feeling D, and they all may be variations of sadness. So typically, because we are TE users, we don't have this extensive vocabulary to explain these feelings. This is all variations of sadness. There's this kind of sadness, and 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 they're all very different. But they're all sadness. Or happiness. There's all kinds of different happiness. And we struggle to be able to express that. Why? And I'll get to that in a second. But so the expressed feelings of others are cross-referenced with an internal feeling framework. So if someone appears to be sad, we want to know why they're sad. And we're not going to ask them why, because naturally FI users are skeptical. They have to cross-reference it with their own internal framework. This person's sad because this and this and this and this. And I can put myself in those shoes and I understand why they're sad. Where FI users drop the ball is if they've never experienced that emotion before, it's hard for them to relate. And FI users they're terrible at counseling because they can't relate as well. They have to have experienced it because, like, again, it has to be subjective emotion, or they have to have read about it somewhere, or they have to have studied it and have to have felt it at some point to be able to relate. So FI users are not as effective as that, but when they do relate, it's very deep. It's not like just, oh, I know how you feel. It's, wow, I can feel, like, it can bring this ultimate manifestation of feeling. FI users, what I call, they have a lot of deep sentiment. Like, seemingly, FI is seemingly more deep than FE. So that's why FI users can appear to be big babies at times, especially when it's underdeveloped. So anyway, these feelings that are coming in and perceived by our perception functions, they're cross-referenced. So this person's feeling this way. So an FI user will tend to be a little more emotionally analytical, trying to make it fit in this framework. Is it sadness A or is it sadness B? And if it's sadness A, it had to have these preludes to become sadness A. So if it's sadness B, it had to have these preludes. Once we identify that, we're able to really truly read the person. So FI users they pierce deep. FE users immediately get it, but there's less depth. Much like TE and TI, TE is it's easy to break a TE argument, but TE doesn't care. Like, you can tell me I'm wrong, and I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. Let's find out what's right. TI, on the other hand, it kind of shakes their foundation if they find out something's not logically consistent, because they've spent so much time doing it. But on the other hand, trying to find a TI user that's not logically consistent, a dominant TI user that's not logically consistent is pretty rare, because they have analyzed it from every single angle. just like FI does, it analyzes the feeling from every single angle, and it understands that, and it emotionally analyzes it. Okay, I'm relating it to this, so it has this internal database of all this power and all this emotion. So therefore, it is more investigative and skeptical of incoming feeling from others, and it is seeking to identify those feelings to itself. It pierces, like I said it before, it's very piercing. It pierces the emotional veil. And it knows what people really want and why they're using their emotion, and uses TE to find logical consistencies in that particular thing, because TE doesn't have this internal logical framework. It analyzes immediately. So we use this FI, and we come in and we find out that these incoming feelings, and we seek to break those feelings down with TE, and immediately we'll know, is it logical that this person's feeling this way or not? And then we'll relate it to sadness A, or sadness B, or sadness C, or sadness D. So, and FI users are less likely to be emotionally manipulated because of this. So FI users don't have that emotional manipulation as much as FE users would. Now, FI can be underdeveloped and they can become emotionally manipulated, but ultimately they do have an advantage. FE users will pick up the emotion, harmonize with it, and that emotion may be fake. It may be a tool someone's using to get something they want. Excuse me real quick. And so that's a big thing. So emotional manipulation, FI users are less likely to become emotionally manipulated. It does this because it's dependent on TE. FI in conjunction with TE functions on this same polar axis, because in order to express itself in its truest form, one must know that the environment is logically consistent, or the expression may be distorted. So in a sense, FI, its secret goal is to self-express. It wants to pull everything into its web of expression so everything can harmonize with it versus it harmonizing with everything else. Now, FE users will typically see this as selfish, much like FI users will see FE as superficial. It wants to harmonize everything. It wants to connect internal harmony. It wants people to understand it. It wants to harmonize with people. It does not want people to harmonize. In a sense, it does not want to harmonize itself to people. It wants people to harmonize with it. And so it's backward. But here's where it gets really interesting. Is it does this because it is dependent on this TE, because the environment has to be logically consistent. Much like FE had to have this environmental emotion, or rather feeling-based consistency, FI needs the environment to be logical so that it can express itself in its truest form. If it's like, think about let's just put it real simple. A photograph looks different underwater than it does out of the water. What TE does is it tries to structure this environment to where everything is out of the water. So everything is logically consistent. And in order to do that, it has this desire to build and control the external environment, because FI is its hidden governor. FI wants to express itself, and it feels that if it can't express itself truly without having that logical consistency, because if I try to sing underwater versus singing on land, it's going to be different. Which one is my true expression? Which one is really me? I don't know if I can't have that consistency. So TE seeks to form a universal land so it can express itself everywhere. So here is the hidden desire that everybody wonders why ENTJs are control freaks. Because ENTJs, all they seek is self-expression. And they do it through the desire to control the environment. That is it. That is the truest expression of why we do what we do. ESTJs are the same way. And ultimately, if you can understand this, that we seek that level of control of the external because we want to express ourselves, then ultimately you'll understand why we do what we do, and versus placing a biased judgment on control freaks or whatever else you want to call us. we want the rules to be consistent, in a sense, throughout everything we do, and it seeks to form this external environmental consistency so it can be its truest form. That's what FI wants to do, and it uses TE to do that. So FI sees everyone as a unique individual. Everyone's born of their own position, and they're born of choice, and they have the ability to become what they want to become without the constraints of this feeling of the greater good. That's why FI users are more likely to be capitalist. We believe that the power of choice is in us. We believe that choice is everything. And as I move forward, I want to make sure that we, as I move forward in life, I want to make sure that we understand that each person is born of their own position. They're born of their own power choice. And when they choose to become themselves without being pressured by the society, then they can express themselves the way they need to be expressed. It's essentially the reason why we're having these differences in the political environment right now. It's because we're not understanding these basic principles of why we're doing these things, our interior motives, our ultimate motives for doing things. So if you really think about it, it gets really interesting because the INTP doesn't seek to change the external environment logically, because it has a huge world of logic in its head, it seeks to create an external environment emotionally, so its logic can be consistent, if that makes sense. Anyway, it's the same with the ENTJ, but it's backwards, flipped. So you have to understand these axes. You have to understand that FI and TE work together just like FE and TI work together. It's not like you can use TE and TI. I mean, we use all 8, but we use them in its same axis, a polarity in a sense. So, again, this FI, sorry if I'm bouncing around, but FI has this intense desire to live life true to themselves and seeks to pull others into this internal world, this internal value. So it seeks to harmonize with people by bringing them to its own level of feeling. So it seeks this internal conformity without interest in changing itself in order for an external harmony. And should it find that someone cannot connect, it simply chooses to harmonize with someone else. So FI users are a lot more selective in their friendships. FE people will cater to everyone. And I'm not saying this is bad. I'm saying society needs all these types. I'm saying that we just have to understand that. We have to understand why there's certain people that seemingly do stupid things that we think may be stupid. But if you tried to get an FE user to do what an FI user does, you will drive that FE user mad. I have worked my entire life giving advice to people, and I wasn't even qualified. But I have seen this over and over and over, giving personal advice about relationships, and then I'm like, well, the logical thing is to do this. They could not bring themselves to do it, because you can't take someone on this emotional or this feeling field of the TI and FE axis, which is I have to create this external feeling environment of external consistency through feeling and value judgments, and frame it with my TI, my internal network of logic. You can't flip it. I can't tell them to be, oh, you just control your environment and it fixes it. So ultimately I was giving these people bad advice, even though it made logical sense to me, and everyone who heard it said, oh, you speak truth, which patted my ego enough, but in reality, looking with hindsight, I was wrong. There's a better way to solve these issues. So, it just, like I said, FI chooses to seek harmony with someone else. In this manner, underdeveloped FI can be seen as deeply manipulative and self-centered. Okay? So, because it does not change its feeling based on the environment around it. So it's more blunt, it's more direct, it's more, I'm not going to change the way I feel because you want to feel a certain way. So FI is seen as very blunt. It's seen as, being misunderstood. Now, developed FI, like, I've worked on a lot on developing my FI. It simply, it doesn't work the same way. It does work that way. I'm sorry, let me rephrase. It just does it with a different motive. It's like I seek to bring people into harmonize with my emotions so we can get on the same page to accomplish something in the environment to make change. So FI's primary priority is self-expression. You've got to remember that FI wants self-expression. It wants to express itself, and it wants the cleanest, most logically consistent environment in order to do so. That's why TE is its partner in crime. FI does take longer to form these relationships with others because of this internal cross-referencing with its own subjective truth when it comes to value judgments. But it really, really, it works with this undercurrent of TE, and we have to understand and access how it works and its value judgments in the world. So, in conclusion here, before I make this video an hour long, which nobody will watch, FI is deep, it's piercing, it's truth revealing, just like TI is when it comes to logic. FI has this large framework of feeling, much more sophisticated than FE. FE, on the other hand, is fast, quick, and it's independent. FI is interdependent. Every feeling is related to another feeling of similar merit. It could be related to a whole network of different feelings and emotions and value judgments. And so FI users typically are unaware of their own values immediately. Sometimes, well, dominant FI users are, but they're just not. They're aware of their own, but they're not aware of others' feelings as fast. It takes a time to process and relate and fit those feelings into this framework, and then TE observes the logic in that feeling itself. So, underdeveloped FI users, like typical ENTJs, don't usually develop their FI until way later in life, and that's why we come off as total dicks. and because we don't understand a lot of our values, and we don't understand our motives for doing things. So, FE, on the other hand, is the opposite of FI. It needs TI to balance it out. It needs TI as its partner in crime. FE with TE would not work. It'd be a conflict. FE with TI works much better because now TI can take everything and search for this universal truth, creating a value consistent environment. So FE is also just as sophisticated in the sense of FI, but it's just flipped. So TI is a very deep logic. FI is a very deep feeling. TE is a very fast, quick moving logic. FE is a very fast, quick moving feeling or value judgment. And so these counterbalances, I don't want people to question their self-worth. If you're a dominant FE user, don't think you're superficial. Just get in touch with your TI to develop your depth. That's important. If you're a dominant TE user, develop your FI to get your depth. You can't be a TE user without a developed FI, or you'll look like an imbecile. And this is why ENTJs have bad names. So we have to strive forward in making changes, and understanding ourselves is a big part of it. And understanding why we do the things we do and our interior motives of why we seek to these things. So what governs these emotions is thinking. Thinking governs our feelings. And I'm sorry, I said emotions, but our feelings are value judgments. And if it's an inferior function. Okay. On the other hand, if you're a dominant thinker and an inferior feeler, then it's going to be a little bit different. The stack really makes a difference in how you do those things. So anyway, I'm going to make this video too long, so there's so much more to talk about when it comes to these subjects, and I've gone in a little circle, so I apologize. If you stuck with this entire video, congratulations, you have a whole lot of patience. I don't think I've ever could have done it myself, but anyway, hope this provided value to you all, and if you have any suggestions or comments or ways that I can make this video better in the future, more than happy to do so. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening.